Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Nature of Predators. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 149. Memory transcription subject, Onzo, Yodel Technician Specialist. Date, Standardized Human Time, March 7th, 2137. Samantha Harris had the bright idea to try and set up as many traps as possible, and also suggested silencing our electronic devices. The last thing we needed was to receive a communique from our officers that tipped the Colchians off to our position. Humans might be excellent marksmen, but they weren't able to take on a solo mission against 15 enemies, regardless of what their video games might suggest. That was the power fantasy if I'd ever seen one, rather than a plausible demonstration of their actual abilities. As for myself, the hasty yodel training that I'd received had been enough for me to hit target downrange with a firearm. It had served well in Silas, but that had been a different scenario from close quarters combat.
"Do you think the others are safe on the bridge?"
I messaged Sam over our text-com link. The human's green eyes turned towards me for a moment before she typed a response.
"Sovlin's racism is so thick it'll keep the squids out."
I shoved my paw into my mouth, muffling a laugh. It had once been offensive how derogatory that Gojit was towards Yodel, humans, and many other species. But I realized by now that bigotry was embedded into his every waking thought. Not that I'd wish for Sovlin to be in grave peril, isolated from the rest of the crew. But I almost wished the heroic captain was at my side. He was a renowned strategist capable of routing the Arxor with the Federation crew, and his bullheadedness rendered him defiant in combat. Short of Tyler having to watch my back, I would have felt more serenity with someone I'd been in ground action with before. Sam was a competent soldier, but I couldn't predict her moves or her strengths.
Likewise, she has no idea about how I react during bullet-flying scenarios. It was noble of her not to leave me behind, but I'm sure she has mixed feelings about only having a herbivore at her side. I have to prove that I'm not dead weight all over again. Thinking about what my best contributions would be, I tapped into the ship's security feeds so that we could keep tabs on our enemies' movements. The Colchians had split into two teams, with their smaller contingent sweeping the corridors away from the bridge. The hostiles were wearing envirosuits, so venting the atmosphere was rendered ineffective. Sealed bulkheads had come down outside the central areas, which would take significant time to cut down. Those were designed to contain fires, or to keep out intruders. In our central hub, I could see the bridge personnel by the officers toting high-powered rifles, as well as Tyler, Carlos, and Sovlin in deep conversation by the sensor station. I hoped that they weren't plotting anything too nonsensical. But that wasn't my concern right now. Machines and technology were my specialization, so it occurred to me that I could tap into the automated weaponry built into the vessel. I didn't want to step on toes if our commanding officers were planning to commandeer the fortifications to their directives, but I knew that I could allocate these resources to my advantage, assuming that I received permission. The guided turrets and wall-mounted defenses could be turned against the encroaching enemies. Samantha was waving at me to hurry, so I fired off a typo-ridden message to the comm station as I ran. The Terran shoved me through an open maintenance access panel, then began spilling liquid across the floor. Peacekeeper Harris had snatched a massive jug of water meant for the coffee pot back at the kitchen and was now using it to coat the floor with life-giving fluids. Was the idea of a trap to make the ground slippery? As amusing as it would be to see the Colchians losing their footing, that was a minor annoyance at best. I could see the telltale wicked smirk on her face, however, and decided to trust her machinations. If anyone could make the basic elements of carbon-based life deadly, it was a human. "Permission granted, Onzo. Good luck," the comm station had transmitted in response to my request. "Utilize the resources near your location for any tactical advantage. Neutralize as many enemies as you can. The defense we're mounting will focus on the area around the bridge. The United Nations cannot afford to lose control of the nuclear-armed warship." This would be an excellent way to make it look like humanity was attacking innocent worlds, or that they were behind any other manner of atrocities, I realized. Is that why the Colchians are boarding us? Ralchi, they could try and fly to Lian or Skelga under UN banner.
The ship had to go down before we allowed the monsters to have our resources at their disposal, even if they didn't have anything so devious in mind.
Capturing a Terran craft for study would give them an edge at reverse engineering our latest advancements. It could also tip off some features of the Yodel vessels that we'd just raised from our shipyards. Suddenly, this mission had become less about forging ahead towards Alpha and more about keeping our toys out of Kolshian possession. As much as I loathed those bastards, I couldn't deny this ambush was a clever way to turn the tables. "Damn it, we need more," Samantha growled to herself, nigh inaudible as the water ran dry. "If you've got admin access to the right functions, Onzo, trip the fire suppression system." I swiped at my holopad, abandoning the camera view for a moment. "Done. You know I love the ocean, but creating one inside the ship seems ill-advised. So dramatic, acting like it's some torrential downpour that'll flood the whole craft. Well, drowning's pretty much the only lethal use of water, and if that's not it, then fill me in on your plan. Or what? You'll give me puppy dog eyes?" "Maybe. It could be my new resting face." "You have fun with that. You'll never crack me. Now cut the chatter." The human ducked into the maintenance shaft and resealed the panel. Deciding to humor her request, I turned on the fire sprinklers to full blast. Samantha had already climbed atop a pipe, gesturing for me to join her. She whispered something about keeping my limbs out the water. I was growing more skeptical about her plan by the minute, so I decided to work on my own options in case this didn't pan out. The primate fetched an emergency supplies from a box on the wall, pulling out a defibrillator and bottles of water. She uncorked the liquid and spilled it on the floor, mixing it with a small pool seeping beneath the panel. "I can't fathom what she's doing, so it's time to look for other avenues. There's no turret by our location, and there's Kolshians heading our way." The enemy likely would have swept any duct or hiding spots regardless, but the water on the floor could tip them off about our presence at once. I balanced myself carefully on the pipe, where it was proving difficult not to crowd Samantha in the tight space. Her verdant eyes were glowing with delight, as well as a sense of pride. She peered over my shoulder at the camera feeds, tracking a group of about a dozen boarders as they drew closer. They had finished sweeping the airlock compartment and were moving further down the hall towards us. "All right, here goes nothing." Samantha dropped the electrode pads into the water and waited for an opportunity to pounce. I finally got an inkling of what she was trying to do, but there was no time to strike down this folly. "Time to ride the lightning, Deckers." As confused Kolshians waded through the wet pool, the UN soldier triggered the shock button of the AED. Nothing happened. The life-saving device searched for a heartbeat signal and found none, preventing any shock from being rendered. Samantha scrunched her nose in confusion. I suspected the human anticipated more devastating consequences from the electric current. Amid a slew of muttered curses from Sam, the invading troops continued their search in progress, entirely unaware of the attempt. With the primate's plans yielding underwhelming results, I racked my brain for an alternative. A single holopad swipe led me back to the fire suppression system, where I workshopped the beginnings of an idea. Firefighting foam was still available for deployment, according to the computer. My best idea for a defensive measure was to deploy the goo in full force in this hallway sector. The substance was a novelty compared to the Federation ships, which only had overhead sprinklers and manual extinguishers if further flame retardants were needed. I recalled how ill-equipped Yodel were to ward off blazes when I was a child. Most roofs in Rinsa were thatched by our staple grain, herd, or by wetland grasses, reeds as the humans referred to them. Those dry materials were quite flammable, which led to an infamous fire caused by Ralchi's priests in Lern's largest continent, Tyson. The temples of Thyssen were massive and superfluous. It was fitting that the twin villages of Kalstar and Pyora were both caught up in the purification rite gone wrong. At the sacred ground they serviced both settlements. Our only technique to stop the blaze prior to first contact was using water pails kept on customary fire brigade hooks by our homes. Needless to say, the Ralchian ritual claimed dozens of lives and tenfold more buildings. It was only stopped by a hasty demolition surrounding the inferno to starve it of fuel. The tragedy had been a humbling reminder of fire's raw power. If the humans devised something that could bury nature's exothermic killer, combustion, that could claim entire neighborhoods, hoped it was good enough to encumber the Kolshians. I quieted my nerves, seeking a clear mind before leaping into action. With a few more succinct swipes, firefighting foam was bucketed atop the tentacled foes, like shaving cream falling from the sky. Genuinely, it looked reminiscent of the goop I'd seen Tyler lather on his face before running sharp blades across it. Humans were strange in more ways than one, but chopping off their own hair down to the root was special. Most species preferred not to grow their fur in clumpy patches. If I shaved the fluff around my snout, I'd look like I went sniffing around a wood chipper, minus the smattering of green blood that would entail, of course. My whiskers twitched with amusement, holding on to the mental image of my reflection. Sam bared her teeth with austerity. Not so funny. Something told me that it would be suicidal to answer honestly. I switched over to the camera view on my holopad to show her my handiwork, rather than passing along my views on human grooming. Copious amounts of foam were clumped atop Kolshian soldiers, dripping down their envirosuits. The bubbly spray encroached on the viewing strips on their bulbous eyes, blinding them. Multiple enemies were pouring at their faces, struggling to wipe it away as more kept coming. I silently slid the maintenance panel open and pressed myself flat on my stomach. This was as good of an opportunity as we'd get, this far away from automated defenses. The primate also pressed herself prone to the ground, assessing her own target with her depth-perceiving eyes. My immediate assessment of distances was nowhere near a human level, but it was good enough to get the job done. Focusing one eye down the sights of my pistol, I fired a shot into the enemy's center of mass. Samantha's synchronized bullets burst through another Kolshian stomach, like a xenomorph, a creature Tyler had giddily taught me about, spraying chunks of organs and violet blood onto a nearby compatriot. My breathing was purposeful and concentrated, as I calculated my every move. Don't let them catch their bearings. The enemy are caked in foam, unable to move fluidly or see where the shots are coming from. If they were other Federation soldiers, they would have already panicked. I wheeled my gun towards another target and fired an instinctual shot with steady pause. My aim wasn't perfect, but it was enough to rend the tip of its tentacle clean off. The Kolshian's gun clattered to the ground, without two arms to grip it. Trusting that the maimed enemy couldn't fire back in the next few seconds, I searched for my next mark. Samantha was popping off shots one after another. I tried not to register the last enemy that she had hit, who was missing a clean chunk from the side of his skull. Swallowing the nausea that rose up in my throat, I staved off jitters enough to shoot yet another foe near their heart. Our enemies couldn't return accurate fire without a visual. With our unconventional tactics, the Kolshians were falling into disarray. None of their training prepared them for a yodel twisting a human fire suppression system for nefarious purposes. The few hostiles that were left standing turned their guns in the direction of the gunfire. But the blind shots went what would have been a chest height, slamming into the wall above the access panel. A paw full of enemies, in their blind attempt to return fire, bumbled off shots that hit friendlies between them and us. I dished off several shots in quick succession. And with my newest expansion of the dead and wounded, the dazed boarders chose to stumble backwards down the corridor. Samantha poked her slender arm out from the crawl space, lobbing bullets after hastily retreating, foam-drenched foes. The human chuckled to herself. You're one deranged coffee-loving yurtle. I like you. I am not deranged. My plan worked, but I think yours was made up by Tyler. Water is a poor conductor of electricity, so at low voltages it was never going to be fatal. I rambled happily, switching my table. To shock someone to death, you need to contact the area via a large portion of the body's total surface area. Oh, and electricity entering through some mucous membranes would also increase sensitivity. Have you been watching people get electrocuted and taking notes? No. I just think electrical currents are interesting. I understand more than most people think I do. I'm going to repeat this for the furthest planters in the fields. I'm a rocket scientist. The primate ducked out of the maintenance shaft, wrinkling her nose at the corpses. I'd treat you with appropriate respect for that role if I hadn't seen you beg for food items multiple times today. Hey, you'd do it too if you could get away with it. I've seen you point at a remote on the other side of the couch and say that it's too far away. That's conserving energy. Or just being comfy. That sounds an awful lazy to me. You know I'm right, because you've looked into your heart and seen it to be true. Now that we've settled that important matter, what's our next move with the eye placement police? Feck. I guess that nickname fits the squids. Ass clowns can't even figure out directional eyes don't mean jack shit. Next, we find proper place to hole up. Something tells me the Kolshians won't be back, and I say we've done our part. It's time to let our friends take care of the rest. I'd say that it is. If the two of us could take on a squad with our wits alone, our friends can handle themselves. You know, I could be at home, napping next to a Hansa, or attending a stage play right now. Lian's been built back to something amazing. The Yodel have less of a stick up their ass than other aliens. Lian's great by the sole factor of not having the Feddies around anymore. And also, we all want to go home, free of this godforsaken war. So let's not fuck this up in the final lap. I have faith that we'll drive these borders out. We made fools of them, and we have to keep making fools of them all the way to Alpha. My claws tightened around my gun, recalling my own outrage towards the Federation. I'm just happy we survived this bout up to now, with those numerical odds back there. After today, there's a few less of those bastards out there to owe us that debt. Eventually, we are going to make every Kolshian that partook in or helped with this shit pay for their crimes against sapiens. But, here and now, I just want them to fuck off our ship. Damn straight, Anzo. This is our ship. Nobody takes what belongs to humanity and lives to tell about it. From now on, this shit's going to be true for the Yodel too. Nobody fucks with either of our species. Thank you for sticking with me out here, Sam. The human grinned. It's been a pleasure, Brainiac. Having thwarted the Kolshians' attempts to flush us out in the ship's furthest reaches, I could only hope the UN personnel holed up in the bridge had found a crafty way to defend their position. There were dozens of boarders intruding on our warship, and we couldn't relax our guard until every last one of them was taken out. Like Samantha and I found mutual agreement over, humanity had no intention of letting the enemy succeed with this takeover. The push to Alpha might be slowed, but it wasn't going to be halted on our watch. End of chapter. There is a new legend on the horizon. Blueberry Cat has taken the T6 Patreon spot. Thank you very much, and I'm sure that I speak for everyone when I say that. I would just like to thank our T5 members, Lord Azrical, Ambrose Cattell, Quantum Wednesday, Dragzoon W.R.E, Blueberry Cat, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, and Leslie 517. Thank you very much.